What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming to you once again on behalf of Football Beyond the Stats in our Movement Play of the Week, this week for week 9 of the 2022 National Football League season. However, like we've done in the last 2 years, we are going to go to a little blast from the past here. 2 years ago, we dove into Michael Vick versus the Minnesota Vikings and looked at his stellar performance on that respective day on his walk-off winner. Last year, we looked at a number of plays from Barry Sanders from Thanksgiving. This year, we are going to go back to my man AD from 2007 all the way back when Adrian Peterson was a rookie. 2007 week 9. We just had the anniversary of it from November 4th, I want to say. And this was at a time before I even knew who Adrian was, before any time, well before any time that he and I had worked together. But ironically enough, I happened to be in attendance. I was in row 8 on the 50-yard line for this respective game against the then San Diego Chargers when Adrian Peterson set the single game rushing record. 296 yards, 30 carries for 296, almost 10 yards a clip. I think 3 touchdowns, and as a rookie at that. And obviously at that point, I wasn't even actually working with that many players. In fact, I only had one player at that respective time who I was working with. We had just started my respective business, Explosive Edge Athletics, at that time, which was right across the road from Vikings headquarters. But we only had one NFL player, and he actually was not a Viking. Now, this respective roster in 2007 ended up having a number of individuals that I partnered with at some level or another. Adrian, ultimately, longer and further along down the way. Antoine Winfield, who was a player who I partnered with for a significant period of time, a guy that went to a Pro Bowl in a number of Pro Bowls here at the Minnesota Vikings, and somebody that I'm was and am very close to. Tavares Jackson, who I did a little work with, EJ Henderson, who I trained a few times, and Fred Evans, who I worked with a little bit as well. I think each one of those players was on this 2007 roster for the Minnesota Vikings. But that being said, on this respective day, Adrian Peterson, the one and only, maybe the greatest running back of that respective generation of the last 20, 30 years, would have been playing as a rookie in this respective game. So without further ado, we're going to get into what Adrian did on that day and try to take a peek at who he was, and maybe, just maybe, look at some of the things that Adrian could have done even different and differently than that which what he did in order to accumulate more yards. And I can also get into some things that Adrian and I have seen from Adrian leading up to our work together years and years later that I would have loved to address, because it was quite obvious here really right from the start. So as we dive into this, we're going to see it carry by carry. I think it's about a 5.5 minute video clip, but of course at different times throughout, I want to highlight some of the things what I'm seeing from Adrian. In fact, right there, right off the bat, we're going to look at this. Early young Adrian Peterson had a lot of novelty, not a lot of shake, not a lot of elusiveness in the traditional sense, but he had a certain novelty and creativity because he was just such a unique specimen at the running back position. And for those of you who've never seen Adrian up close, we're talking about a guy who's 6'1 plus, 220-ish, and just had physical qualities and characteristics in bunches, right? So he was able to draw upon this really frequently. And that's where we see some of the novelty within his craft as a rookie. He was fully willing to be able to do these little, like, look at this little hurdle right here. And he had no problem spinning through the air, moving in ways that maybe could have got him knocked off course, because he just had that much reliance on him being more physically gifted than the rest of the individuals, even on a National Football League Sunday. So I've often said that Adrian was one of the only players who probably actually could have played in the National Football League out of high school and before he ever even played in college. We have to remember here that Adrian was that type of physical specimen. Now, I know that that's a pretty steep claim because obviously the players in the National Football League are all physically gifted, but you're talking about a different animal right here. And like, this is another one of those cases. This is not only quintessential early Adrian Peterson, but quintessential all the time, all day, right here. Find an edge, hit the corner. And like I've said numerous times, and people might have heard me say this, AD, when hitting the edge and hitting the corner, was essentially like Seabiscuit. What do I mean? Adrian had this Seabiscuit mentality where maybe the person that he was lined up against and they were even, just like Seabiscuit and any other horse. On paper, they were supposed to be the same speed, or maybe the defensive back would have been faster on paper. But on field, in a game situation, you could line Adrian Peterson up against just about anyone, and he had that Seabiscuit mentality. He was not going to lose. And in these respective situations, when he gets a corner, he gets an edge, he sees this type of affordance and he looks to accept it all day, every day. This type of affordance for him with this type of green grass, that's so inviting. That's an affordance, aka an opportunity for action that AD is always looking for. Adrian wasn't always the most sensitive to how immediate opponents were behaving. In fact, if I knew then, or I should say, if I knew when we worked together, what I know now about perceptual attunement and sensitivity to immediate opponents and maybe how to set up representative learning environments and alive movement problems that could channel movement behavior to be more perceptually sensitive and attuned, Adrian is somebody that would have thrived with the current movement Miyagi way of life. I guarantee you that. But this was, again, well before I even ever knew Adrian and before he and I had done any work together. But this is a different animal. Okay. And I can tell you this play, along with several others, I was at this sideline. Okay. So right behind the Minnesota Vikings bench, 50-yard line, looking down, and you'd see this space that was just sort of always beckoning him, always inviting him. And he had such a gas pedal that through first and second gear, and I'm talking steps 1 through, probably about step 8 or so, there was just a significant difference between him and every other player. So when he sees this green grass, it is tasty to him. In a situation like this, there's going to be a situation here and another situation coming up later on, I believe, in this respective game that I wish Adrian would have been in my learning environment right now, maybe 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22. The last season that Adrian and I would have saw each other was his last year here at the Minnesota Vikings, 2016, going into his time, not with the Saints in 2017, but when he became a Cardinal, I was able to do a little bit of, advising there too, to where, it was these situations that I started to look at much more frequently. So kind of calling the elephant in the room, I've done a lot more work in our learning environments when a guy gets ahead of steam and he's moving at a faster clip, to have 1, 2, or 3 chasers with an unfolding problem in front as well, sort of like what we see here. So players could become sensitive and attuned, and I'm just going to spotlight some things here, maybe to a chaser here, as you see this charger, you see this charger, you see this charger, and you see this one. But you also know that something is unfolding out here, right? Like if we look at where Adrian's head and eyes are at, he is looking ahead while players are chasing and converging. Okay. With Adrian, this would have been a situation that I would have loved to be able to do more work with. The reason why I say that is because Adrian was so reliant on that gas pedal that he often got ahead of things But then a problem would unfold in front of him, and he would not be able to take in the information about that unfolding problem and organize and coordinate a movement solution. That guys would catch up behind him because there were so many guys typically chasing from behind. So I would have loved to have him in these respective situations yet again, but admittingly, he and I never did any of this work together whatsoever in our time later on, years and years later. But this move, when again, um, narrow base of support, we see him here, narrow base of support, relatively higher center of gravity, which was at this time the way that he typically moved in evasive agility scenarios. Once we did work together, we did a lot of work on widening his base of support, being able to have some more variability within his movement strategies and solutions, trying to get to a lot more outside foot power cuts, because at this time, early Adrian Peterson was really reliant, higher center of gravity, narrower base of support, and a lot of crossover cuts. He also did a lot of jump cutting in these scenarios, like what we're going to see unfold right here. Okay. So just that narrow stance, little crossover, hot, nifty, narrow stance jump cut that ends up getting him a number of more yards by the sideline. And of course, Adrian Peterson never going to go out of bounds in these situations. And we'll see it again later on. Here he scores his first touchdown, I believe. And again, Adrian Peterson was well on his way to a record-setting day here at this point. We're going to see a few plays, I believe, where he either gets short gains or no gains, even maybe in some of these scenarios. Some of them, I would say, Adrian wasn't always afforded the greatest offensive line in front of him. And obviously, to go for 296, your offensive line had to be doing some work. So I'm not taking anything away from this offensive line on this respective day. But over time, I believe that Adrian could have solved more complex movement problems and even accumulated more yards than that, which what he did. And I know that's quite a statement to make when we're talking about arguably the best running back of at least this respective decade. In the 2000s, in the 2010 to 2020-ish, we're talking about arguably the best running back to be playing the game. And now at this point, they're selling out, they being the Chargers, are able to sell out to beat Adrian Peterson, okay, to beat the Vikings through trying to contain Adrian. And that makes what he did on this respective day that much more impressive as I continue to talk through this. We go back to that very first play that I talked about. We see it now unfold here again. So ironically enough, Adrian, in his creative, novel way and form of life, these are things that after the ACL, MCL of 2011 and into 2012, he stopped doing as much of. We saw him leave his feet less and less and less as time goes on. And of course, he got longer and longer in the tooth, but found more skillful ways of being able to solve these respective problems. At that time, by the time he had the ACL, MCL, he would have been 4 or 5 years into the league. And obviously, by the time he ended his time here at the Minnesota Vikings in 2016, he had now been in the league for 9 years, right? So that's bound to happen, that maturity, that evolution, because action capabilities are changing. And as action capabilities change, the way you see the world and the way you solve problems changes as well. But he was just really emergent with his movement skill at this point, because he had gotten so accustomed to just being that much more physically gifted and just letting his physical qualities and characteristics shine and express themselves out on the field. And here we see probably the play or a play from his rookie season that most people who would have been in attendance just would have saw this different animal, right? I'm going to go ahead and look at this in slow motion right off the bat. And he ends up obviously taking this bad boy to the house. But there we see that little skip through. I've talked a lot about when Saquon Barkley right now, as far as current running backs are concerned, see very narrow gaps opening. pretty far out in front of oneself. He's very willing to hit the gas pedal. Adrian Peterson is the example. He's the exemplar of this. When Adrian would see daylight, he had this world class for football acceleration, first gear, second gear, that he just absolutely trusted, especially early Adrian Peterson. But even if we rewind back to his 2012 MVP season, watch those highlights, and there's a lot of them. Obviously, he had a 2,000-yard season then in his MVP year. He was so reliant on that gas pedal, even coming back from injury. But watch it here as unfolds, and he sees this tiny gap, but then opens up into a big gap really quickly, and he just exploits it. Look at this gap right here. He knows that there's a defender converging on that space, right? There's a defender converging at that angle, and he just knows that right here, right now, this little crossover from left to right, he can trust in that, and he's going to put that first and second step out of this little navigation, this little transition navigation step. And with this converging defender right here, he didn't care. Adrian never cared about things like that. He knew even if this guy did get his hands on him, which he does, that Adrian was a horse, like in the fact, like he was going to pull and go plow horse, go from speed horse to plow horse, race horse to plow horse, and just pull that guy through if he needed to. And of course, Adrian was moving at too quick a speed with too much aggression for guys to come up high at all. And most guys didn't want to go low on him either, because those legs were always coming. They were like piston-like action. And Adrian, even in this case, oftentimes, especially early on, would put his chin down as he did there and sort of feel like he was running by himself. And this is about as pretty as it gets at this point, especially when you're en route to a 296-yard, single season or single game record. But look at him here with these affordances for action. Okay. He's constantly on the perceptual pickup, but it's not a lot of scanning. Okay. Again, if I knew then what I know now, again, not so much 2007 because he and I weren't working together in 2007, but I'm talking fast forward to our time and stints working together, that I would have loved to be able to work on some of the things that I work with players on now, particularly being able to couple perceptions and actions together and require that constant search, because I believe that Adrian would have been able to surpass Emmett's record with those types of movement skills. And like there's a few players that I have had over the years, and I mentioned two of them actually in this conversation thus far: Adrian Peterson and Antoine Winfield. I would have loved to have them in these last few years. And the reason why I say that is because I think that both guys would have thrived even more under the way that I look at movement skill now, in this constant problem solver paradigm. That's what makes this case study so fun for me to even look at. This play here is, we talked earlier about Adrian sometimes coming in a little high and a little narrow, and then getting in this crossover type of action here, as this would be his feet, not my hands. And he sometimes would slip then because of that higher center of gravity and that narrower base of support. And it would be like this teeter-totter where his feet would end up slipping out from underneath him. When he and I ended up working together, that's why we spent as much time as we did lowering his center of gravity, or trying to get towards situations where he could employ this aspect of his toolbox. We wanted to employ this tool particularly near or behind the line of scrimmage when he had to change direction sharply, being able to change center of gravity in a hurry, and being able to go from this narrow base of support to a wider one. But here we see some of the deficiencies within his craft as he tries to do this. And this is something that did happen for him very frequently. He wasn't always able to be able to cut and stop on a dime the way I felt like he needed to be able to move in this direction or to keep his options open when certain informational sources were maybe speaking to him or changing about the aliveness of this movement problem. He wasn't always that sensitive to interpersonal distance between himself and his either opponent and or teammate in what was unfolding in front of him. Another thing that I would have done a ton of work trying to draw his attention and intentions around, trying to educate both of those things. Again, another opportunity that really went without him being able to work on that I would have loved to spend a significant amount of time with. But I admit, I really, in our time together, I never was focused on those things, even though they happened pretty frequently for him. He left some meat on the bone in these scenarios that I would have loved to do and rewind back and have my current perspective and way of life and form of life when he and I work together. So I'm going to keep letting this run through and play through here until we find some more things to look at. Here's one for sure. I just got done talking about his sensitivity or lack thereof of where he was in relation to constantly changing informational variables. We see right here the zebra, he becomes not very sensitive to where he is in relation to this. Look, he ends up running right into him because he is fixated and focused on this guy. Okay. And because he's fixated and focused, all of a sudden that zebra gets in the way, slows him down, and actually makes him less inclined to be able to adapt. Let me go in slow motion here so you can see it unfold. And I actually remember this, even though I would have been like over where my cursor is looking down from the 50-yard line on down. I remember this play actually quite vividly, even though this is a decade and a half ago. It almost looked like he was going to run right into the ref here. And of course, in my learning environments now, we often have a lot of aliveness, a lot of moving parts, teammates, opponents, coaches that are in the middle of the space that one must become perceptually sensitive and attuned around so they can adapt around. But Adrian, admittingly, and I think he would admit this too, that he really didn't care who was in front of him. I've heard teammates say, like, if I don't get out of the way, I know Adrian's going to run right up my freaking back. And they were being quite literal because he just wanted to get north and south, and he wanted to be able to hit the angle, use his speed, use his physical qualities. And this was a situation that I would have, again, loved to have with them. Another one that I would have loved to have with them is too often he wasn't very perceptually attuned. Let's see if I can find a way. Look at where his eyes are. Okay. And where should they be? Obviously, if I can scratch that out, we see where they are, right? But in my opinion, where should they be? He should be looking straight here or looking at opportunities out in front, maybe looking more at this arrow while being able to, through his periphery, take in information about this guy. So he could be sensitive to two particular things, actually three, if we really want to call it as it is. If I can clear those out again, we would love for him to be sensitive and attuned to bearing angle of this guy, of this respective immediate opponent, relative velocity value of that respective guy and opponent, and the constantly changing interpersonal distance as the angles and relative velocity changes. So as I draw my hands there, as his angle changes and as he gains ground, how is that other guy gaining ground? And as that happens, an affordance or an opportunity is going to be taken away. So he could or should look to making a move earlier so he could either create space or organize and coordinate a movement solution that would deal with this guy in a more efficacious fashion, right? But he doesn't see him until it's a little too late. Watch again now, because the head goes down, the eyes go down, and he doesn't see him until it's too late to actually make a move to cut this back inside. Right. And now he ends up getting past him, but how much did that change or divert Adrian from what he was trying to accomplish? And I think we can all agree that it changed it quite significantly. And then, of course, quintessential AD yet again had an opportunity to go out of bounds, maybe save some tread on the tires, and he doesn't do so. But that's AD. That's Adrian's global intentions. He wanted to inflict his will at all times, and that's part of what made him great. I often criticized it, but that's what made Adrian who he is. And that's about him being his best self, his authentic and creative self, right? So you would have never wanted to take that away, even if I was somewhat critical of it through the years, whether it was the time that we weren't working together, like here, or in the short times that we did work together. But now we see another Adrian Peterson type of thing. Look at this scenario and situation. Go back to what I said a little earlier, right? Adrian getting past the first or second level of the defense, having a number of chasers coming from behind who are going to present relevant threats, but he gets really fixated and focused on what's happening right here. And guys and gals, I know that I'm getting into a lot of different things here as far as Adrian is concerned, but obviously I've watched a lot of Adrian Peterson film and have studied his movement skill with a fine tooth comb. This is a type of scenario and situation I would have loved to present to him, but I will admit we never worked on any of this once we did end up working together. Um, but the feel of what's coming behind him, yes, he makes that guy miss, this guy in the open field, but this guy that's coming behind to deal with both information sources, that which what is unfolding in front versus that which might be coming behind, both relevant information sources that are going to specify one's ways of acting. So if we can find ways to become attuned and sensitive to it, we would love to be in that place, because he might have been off to the races there had he done so. And now we see Adrian, like the evolution of Adrian over the years, he really did find ways to become craftier. He found ways to be authentic. There's another one of those novel creative movement strategies and solution that early Adrian went to. But I would have just loved, I kick myself still to this day that by the time that we did end up working together, which was not at this time, I want to make that very abundantly clear. Like Adrian was doing this off of who Adrian is, of course, and ultimately Adrian is the one of the world's best compensators in the National Football League, bar none. I would have loved to be able to channel his adaptability to be that much more skillful. So again, I admit that I kicked myself. I would have loved to have our time together back, and know then during our time together what I know now, because there's a lot of things I would have done different, and a lot of things I would have loved to work with Adrian on. I believe that he would have been even better than that which what he is, or that which what he was. Here's another one of those plays when I'm on the 50-yard line, guys and gals. I'm literally right where this camera is, eight rows up on the 50-yard line, looking down, and you could see this. Like when Adrian would hit a hole, or when he would see space, and his movement solutions were so tightly coupled to that information that when space would open up, you almost felt, even watching from afar, even watching on TV like this, that when Adrian hit the gas pedal, like you almost felt like you were in his movement system. And I don't even know any other way to explain it, but that's the best way I know how, because I remember seeing this all open up, and Adrian hit that pedal, and you knew you were seeing something special. And you see it right here again. That's a different gear, ladies and gentlemen, a different speed. Some of it God given, no doubt. Some of it his own work ethic, some of it his own training and things. But it was just Adrian's authenticity. It was just Adrian's uniqueness. I mean, this is like one of one type of movement skill at the running back position, particularly with the way that he sees this affordance. Let me go to 50% so you can see it unfold. And I think, thank goodness they actually give us another view of this because you're going to see exactly what I mean. He's not even moving at maximum speed here because you can see when he does. It is gapping, guys. And that's just who Adrian had the capabilities of being. He had the capability of gapping any other player on the field in a hurry. And again, it could be two guys that had 4-4 type speed, but ultimately Adrian went Seabiscuit mode where two horses were even. And he, as that faster racehorse, as that racehorse with a higher will and just had a different game speed, he was going to hit that gas pedal in a little different way. I want to show you this as you see it begin to unfold. And this is another scenario that I would have loved to even make him that much more skillful on. Now, typically, just like he does here, Adrian houses this, but I think that there are some things that happened over time for him because if we would have been able to combine a greater sensitivity and attunement to these types of scenarios and situations, I want to show you something here. I often set up movement problems just like this. Free defender, okay, interacting component parts as far as teammates and defenders are concerned. I will do a lot of 3v3 scenarios like this. Adrian being one, free defender being another, in a couple dyadic relationships, say from the numbers on to the sideline, and then obviously alternating both sides, right? And starting from different places on the field and starting in different initial conditions. We do a lot of these types of things now in my learning environment. I will admit, during the time that I had Adrian and that we did any work together, we didn't get to address any of this because I wasn't looking at the world in the same way as I do now. I think Adrian would have been able to be even more attuned, more intentional, and more adaptable to some of these types of scenarios. Let me get those stars off there that might have unfolded where he could find affordances. Now, granted, guys and gals, he finds and organizes a movement solution here to this respective problem. 3v3, one open defender or one free defender, two dyadic relationships right here. And he ends up setting up a movement solution where he's attuned to this defender who's converging on the space, and this could easily be any given week movement play of the week, and this dyadic relationship between the opponent and himself. He ends up setting up a movement strategy and a solution that's really functional, solves a problem. He ends up in pay dirt and high stepping his way there. But I'm sure if we were to go back through all of Adrian's carries, all of his time across all of his teams, that's something that he could have found more opportunities with. Just the elephant in the room where there would have been probably some yards that he left on the field. And of course, we could say that about any respective player, but Adrian is the one knowing how much he desired to set the rushing record, not only in a single season, which he became awfully close to in 2012, but the all-time rushing record of Emmitt Smith's. And I believe that he had the potential of doing so. It just came up a little short because and you'd want every one of those yards back, right? And I would have loved to have been able to help him more than that, which what I was able to be able to get to that point in place because I know how badly he wanted that and he had the potential of getting it. There's another quintessential, and I know I keep saying that, but that's quintessential Adrian Peterson. Open field, changing gears, high stepping, trying to get a guy to change his position and angle. He does so. Let's watch it in slow motion. The guy ends up horse collaring him then. Oops, I went a little bit too far behind. but let's look at it here. 50% speed now. And you're going to see it unfold. Watch this information movement coupling. Watch these problem solution dynamics unfold. Adrian, open field, defensive back, changes his movement actions slightly to deceive and change the behaviors of another. That guy ends up horse collaring him. Otherwise, he's probably off to the races here. Okay. Adrian is as good as it came in the open field at those types of scenarios and situations. And there it is, November 4th, 2007, 30 carries, 296 yards, and obviously the 3 touchdowns. So I thought this would have been a fun thought experiment. It certainly ended up being that way, at least for me. I also wanted to highlight some of the things that I would love to go back to in the work, and if Adrian would have been still playing in 2022, or if Adrian and I would have been locking arms together in 2022, or when we did, if I viewed the world in that way. I believe that I would have been able to help assist Adrian to educate his attentions and intentions and help him connect to different information sources in a much more sensitive way and make him that much more adaptable skillfully in that which what the problems were offering him in his world. I will admit that we were really not even at that place yet where I was setting as many alive movement problems as I do now. But again, I kick myself for it. Adrian would be one of those players that I would have loved to do it all over with again. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little thought experiment for this movement play of the week, rewinding us back 15 years to when Adrian Peterson set the single game rushing record of 296 yards, which obviously still stands for running back still to this day in the National Football League. And it might for some time, because that's a lot of yards. And that was a rookie running back doing exactly that. Adrian Peterson, one of a kind, one of one, but one of the most adaptable individuals that I've ever seen or been around. And it was truly special to watch him be able to do what he did for so many years. So, guys and gals, for another Football Beyond the Stats movement play of the week, this has been Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, hit like, give me a subscribe, share this around. I hope you enjoyed the time. I will see you guys in week 10 here of the 2022 National Football League season.